I complain for just a minute? We're all friends here, right? Can I complain? I want to tell you about someone I'm having a lot of trouble with in my life. Now, I hate to gossip because I know gossip is bad, but literally, this person just gives me no peace whatsoever. Every time I turn around, it just seems like we're fighting about something. Okay, honestly, I swear, I just can't stand her, okay? She just won't let up. And maybe I shouldn't be telling you this. Maybe I should be telling my therapist. I get it. But I have to get it off my chest somewhere, so you're it. I just don't get along with her, okay? But I have to. But I have to because we're around each other all the time. I just wish, though, that she'd leave me alone. But no, she's always there, driving me crazy, always trash-talking me, telling me lies, telling other people lies about me, too. And she sabotages just about everything good I ever try to do. You know what? I'm fed up with her. I'm totally fed up with her, up to here. And do you know, she even goes to church here. Can you imagine that? And she's a pastor. Can you believe a pastor would do something like that? You know, I'm just, okay, that's it. I've had it. I'm up to here. I'm fed up. Enough of putting me down behind my back. I'm going to call you out right here. You know who you are. Everyone is going to know the truth of how you treat me right now. Okay, let the chips fall where they may. Here you go. Here's her picture. This woman keeps the hamster wheel in my head going round and round and round all the time. How can I ever find any peace with this woman around? So, here we are in this 3-part series called Peacemakers, all about making peace with God, making peace with ourselves, and making peace with others. And last week, if you were here, Pastor West taught us about peace with God, how sweet it is to trust in Jesus to change everything about our life, even when nothing really changes in our circumstance. And we need this peace with God, don't we? At least I do. This shalom, which means completeness, wholeness, lacking nothing, connected with God no matter what. Oh gosh, I need that so much, don't you? Say yeah. And if you were here last week, you also heard a testimony from Pete Bonagura, who talked about being in prison, giving his life to Jesus in prison, and then afterwards, even though he was still in prison, realizing that the prison wasn't in him anymore. And if you didn't catch all that, I'm telling you, you got to go online, you got to listen to last weekend's message, because you really don't want to miss that. It's something special. So Pastor West talked about how we can't have peace, or we can't make peace in our lives either, unless our position with God changes when we, by faith, trust our lives to Jesus. But today we're going to talk about another kind of peace that we all seem to suffer from the lack of. Another kind of peace we need. And you heard a little of my struggle with it just a few minutes ago. It's peace within ourselves. Because I don't know about you, but I can be my own worst enemy when it comes to internal peace. I literally hand feed the little hamsters going around in that wheel in my head. You know, James in the Bible, James 4:1 says this: "What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you?" Oh, can you relate? If you can, say yeah. Mm-hmm. Wars get fought between these ears. Wars get fought in my heart. Wars that nobody else knows about sometimes, but this chaos, it keeps me from experiencing peace and then being a bringer of peace to others. I just can't do it, you know, because I need peace with myself. I need peace with myself. And if you do too, say it with me. I need peace with myself. Amen. That's the truth right there. You know, Jesus exists to reconcile ourself to God and ourself with ourself, and to reconcile ourselves with others. In fact, when asked what the greatest commandment of God was, Jesus answered with all 3 of these areas. Read it with me, Matthew 22:37 through 39. It's on the screen. Go. Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself." See, Jesus wants to give us wholeness. He wants to give us shalom, that completeness, peace in each of these areas, with God, with ourselves, and with others. Not just some outward impression of love and peace, like some fake love and peace. No, the real thing, true peace. It's a peace based on who Jesus truly is and who we truly are in him, who he says we are. not who we think we are or who we try to be. You know, at the teaching team that your pastors attend every Monday to work on these messages that we teach, this past Monday, Pastor Taylor King, who's a counselor and prayer warrior on staff here, she reminded us and she taught us about something called our false selves. Now, the false self is the me that I show to you and that I create for myself to cover up my shame, my guilt, and my sin. And the false self can't access God because it's not truly who I am. The author and priest Brennan Manning, he wrote about this false self, but he called it the imposter. The imposter. The imposter. The imposter self wants to hide, always trying to hide. The imposter self gets offended very easily. The imposter self is very in tune with what the world considers success to be. The imposter self is always trying to earn love. But the imposter can't ever measure up because she's not who God created and loves. You see, Jesus wants to set us free from the false self who will never be enough and give us peace with the person that he made us to be. He wants to set us free and give us true peace. Wouldn't that be good? Say yes. So we want to continue our journey of peace today, learning from a pastor in the Bible named Paul, who wrote letters to the people in the churches that he planted to encourage them and teach them about how to follow Jesus. Now, the people in those early churches, they had a lot of hardship to overcome, a lot of stuff they had to go through, but Paul encourages them with how to have peace nonetheless. Read this with me, Colossians 3:15. It's on the screen. Go. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. Now Paul tells these people, and I believe he tells us too today, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, which means maybe we can take some action to make the peace of Christ rule in our hearts. We can let Christ's peace rule in us instead of letting the hamsters in our cage run wild and free, right? And later on, he gives us some general suggestions of how to make this happen. Listen to this, Philippians 4:4-7. Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. You know, Pastor Paul in this piece is talking about guarding our hearts. Now, our hearts are our emotions, and guarding our minds, and our minds are our thoughts, to have this peace that passes all understanding. And the word guard here, the word guard that's used here in the Greek, literally means a garrison. A whole regiment of Roman soldiers back in ancient times would be considered a garrison. Wouldn't it be awesome to have power like that, guarding our thoughts and our emotions? It would be for me anyway. That would be awesome. So while last week was all about our position with God and that God can give us hope and break our bondage, a great foundation to start with, a wonderful thing. Today we want to build on that foundation. We want to learn how our condition in God can change too, how our hearts and our minds can change to receive and live into the peace that God offers you and me. So the question we want to try to answer today is this: how can I receive peace from God? How can I receive peace from God? So let's prepare today to receive this peace that passes all understanding from God. Are you ready to receive this peace? Yes, me too. Time to let the hamsters out of the cage, to run away. Run away, little hamsters. Be free. Go away and be free. I am tired of the false self. I'm tired of the imposter. She's too exhausting, and I don't like her very much anyway. So here's the first way I can receive peace from God. Number one, embrace a new way of thinking. Embrace a new way of thinking. So, have you ever thought about how you think? Have you ever thought about how you think? No, it's not a trick question. I know, it's like, huh? No. Have you ever thought about how you think? My husband and I, we sometimes play this game with each other. It's called, well, you know, it's sort of called How I Came to Think About Whatever, fill in the blank. How I Came to Think About This. Now, how the game works is this. We might be driving in the car in silence, and one of us, let's say Chris, will say, totally out of the blue, totally out of context, doesn't have to do with anything. He will say something like, green tea shouldn't be really considered tea. And my part of the game would be to say, oh, honey, how did you come to that? And Chris then has to really think about how his thought process worked to get there. And so Chris would say something like this. He would say, well, we were waiting at that red traffic light, and then it turned green. And I thought about how everybody recognizes green as the color that tells them to go at a traffic light, right? And then I thought about what other things are associated with the color green. I thought about broccoli, I thought about asparagus, of course I thought about ferns, and I thought about grass. And then when I thought about nature, I thought about other vegetables that grow out of the ground that were not particularly green, like corn on the cob, and eggplant, and tomatoes. Honey, I'm sort of hungry right now. Can we go to lunch? And when I thought about tomatoes, it occurred to me that ketchup was made out of tomatoes. And that ketchup was red, but there was that time that Heinz ketchup people introduced green ketchup. That didn't seem right at all, to have green ketchup. And then I wondered what other things, food particularly, are green that should never be green. And I thought about Apple Jack cereal. Now that just ain't right. But then I thought about tea. Tea should always be brown, not green. So I said out loud, green tea shouldn't really be considered tea. The guys are laughing. The girls are shaking their head. So I ask you again, have you ever really thought about how you think? Have you ever thought about how you get to some of the conclusions you get to? As you think, so you are, says Bruce Lee, the famous martial arts expert who trained his mind to withstand pain. But more importantly, the Bible also affirms this. Back to our friend Paul. Because after assuring us in Philippians 4 that Jesus wants to give us a peace that passes all understanding, he goes on in the next verse to tell us more about how we can achieve this peace, to change our thinking. Read it with me. It's on the screen. Go. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. See, to have peace within ourselves, we have to embrace a new way of thinking. And this, friends, is inevitably going to include throwing out some lies that we've believed perhaps our whole life and replacing them with some truths that we need to learn. It'll mean weeding out some long-held beliefs and learning new ones. You know, most of the way I think about myself and others in the world, it's not even true. It's just the way I think. Not the good stuff, not the bad, not the happy, not the sad, not the positive or the negative. Where I end up in my thought process all depends on where I start out. And I need to be willing to start to think biblically about myself and God and others. So am I willing to learn more about how and why I think like I think and change? That's my question. See, Paul implies in this verse that we just read that perhaps we haven't started out thinking about things that are true. Perhaps our thought process has not been noble. We may have been concentrating on things that just ain't right. Or maybe impurity has crept up into our thought life. And as for excellent and praiseworthy, maybe we've focused on the negative things we feel and see and haven't wanted to get off that track. No wonder I haven't been experiencing peace. You know, many of you here know, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you now that I am the pastor of Recovery Ministries here at Grace Church, and I'm in recovery myself from drugs and alcohol and codependency for a good number of years. And a tool that recovering people use to find peace with God, themselves, and others is the 12 steps. Specifically, in the 12 steps, steps 4 through 7 are about healing our relationship with ourselves. And in these steps, we're truly asked to examine ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then share what we find with God and someone else. And then following this examination, we become willing to change. We ask God to remove our shortcomings, which includes our stinking thinking. And we embrace a new way of thinking, God's way, not mine. I want to proclaim to you today that how Jesus thinks about you is as his precious child. He knows every aspect of you. He knows the inside and the out. He knows what you're trying to hide. He knows how you're trying too hard. He knows your insecurities and he knows your arrogance. He's got your number, friends. And even so, he seeks to give you peace by changing the way you think, inviting you to drop your false self. Today, you can receive Jesus' new way of thinking. And you know what? This new and improved and true way of thinking exists whether you receive it from Jesus or not, so you might as well receive it. Today, you can come to Jesus with your broken life and just ask him to reveal who you are to him, who he's made you to be, and what needs to change in the way you think and feel today. Trade your thought life for his. And the hamsters will be well on their way to being released from the wheel in your head. Peace is on the way. Embrace a new way of thinking. Jesus' way, not mine. And here's the second thing. Here's the next part of receiving peace from God. After we embrace a new way of thinking, number 2, we put into practice a new way of living. We put into practice a new way of living. Now, friends, this is the fun part. This is the cool part. We get to be different. This is awesome. This is where we actually get to have peace with ourselves. And this is something you're not going to want to miss. It's cool. See, Paul, again, our Pastor Paul, instructs his people in the next verse, 9 of Philippians 4. Read this with me. It's on the screen. Go. Whatever you have learned and received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. Isn't that cool? See, Paul says that he has given us some good instruction. We've embraced this new way of thinking. Now do it. And he assures us that God is going to be with us. So we look at the things that he's already instructed us and asked us to do so far, even in just these few little scriptures we've looked at today. So far, he has said, rejoice, put off anxiety, replace it with pure, praiseworthy thoughts. Present what needs changing to God. Fix our hearts and minds on the truth. Pray. Be thankful. Know that God is with you. See, Paul is trying to show us how to change from our false selves with the hamsters running around up in there to a peaceful self, connected and content in God. See, Paul is teaching us how to kill off our hamsters, to have a peaceful self, connected and content in God. And you know what? Don't worry. No actual hamsters were injured in the writing of this message. Okay? Not at all. This is all hypothetical hamster killing. Okay? No. We become willing to receive God's peace, a peace that only God can give. And it defies our imagination. By changing our thoughts and our actions, we can let the peace of Christ live in us. In the Bible, Jesus' disciple named James is clear when he writes this in James 5:16 through 25. He says, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you're only fooling yourselves. For if you listen to the word and don't obey, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. You see yourself, you walk away, you forget what you look like. But if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. See, this putting into practice a new way of living based on God's truths rather than my own will and feelings. Now, it all sounds great, I know, but it's harder than it seems. Can you say yeah? Yeah. Because what it means is I have to become willing. I become willing when my blood pressure starts to rise in anger or when depression begins to set in about my past. It means I have to be willing to stop right there and pray and be thankful and present my desire to change to God. It means that when I think myself inferior to somebody or superior to someone else, I have to stop and I have to choose to think pure and lovely thoughts about the truths of God. See, it takes daily practice to listen to God's truths and act on them, to be a person at peace with God and myself. But when I do, my condition with God aligns with my position in God as his holy loved child, and I receive a heart of peace, not a heart at war, not with myself or not with anyone else. You know, around here sometimes we sing a song. It's a good song. It has the lyrics, "My chains are gone, I've been set free." Well, I'm here to tell you that if we truly ask Jesus to reveal our real selves and change us, and if we're willing to change our minds and practice a new way of living Jesus' way, we can sing confidently, "My hamsters are gone, they've been set free. No more hamster wheel in my head, blocking my peace." So I want to tell you a story about my friend Joe. My friend Joe became willing to choose a whole new way of living. Now, I met Joe when he was a speaker at a big AA conference I attended. And while he spoke, he talked about how when he was an active alcoholic, he was unemployable. All his relationships had shattered. He was living in this tiny, dirty, rented room with a bare light bulb and a toilet and a broken mirror on the wall. And he would drink his beer, and then he would put his bearded, mangy self on a rusty bicycle, and he would ride to the AA clubhouse where he would watch everyone else getting better when he just wasn't getting better. Well, one day, an old lady who had been sober about a bazillion years at this point came up to him in a meeting and put her finger in his face and said, "Sonny, what you need to do is you need to go home and look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, 'I love you and I like you.'" So Joe said, "All right." He rode his wobbly, rusted bike back to his pitiful rented room and looked at his dirt-caked, bearded face and the broken mirror over his toilet in the glow of the naked light bulb, and he said to his reflection, "Joe, I like you and I love you." And his reflection said back to him, "Joe, you are a liar." And Joe realized at that moment that he had been living a lie. He had. His imposter self, his false self was ruling him. He didn't like or love himself because he wasn't being who God made him to be and who God knew he was. And it was in that moment, he says, that he made the decision to do something different, to take the suggestions of sober people who had gone before him and to actually do them and to be the person that God made him to be. And when I heard Joe speak 20 years ago, he had 15 years sober at that point, and he was a circuit speaker for AA. He was bringing people encouragement everywhere. He became willing to think differently and put into practice what God and people had been telling him. He experienced a peace within himself, and now he was spreading that peace to others. You know, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And to be a peacemaker, we have to begin with finding peace within ourselves. This is going to mean thinking differently and acting differently under the loving direction and encouragement of God. You know, I have a prayer I like to pray to remind me of who's in charge of this changing of me and what the point of having peace within myself actually is. In 12-step programs, this prayer has a name. It's called the 7th step prayer. And so today, I'd like us to pray this 7th step prayer together. If you need to pray it with me, please pray it with me. The words are on the screen. Let's pray now. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. You know, I thought a lot about Jesus' new way of thinking and a new way of acting and this 7th step prayer this past week. And here's why. As I was preparing this message, here's why I thought about it. Because on last Tuesday, I woke up in a sad mood. You ever wake up just in a sad mood? That was me. I had a heavy state of heart and mind. Anybody relate to that? And there was a reason for it. I woke up worried and in fear about one of my grown kids, a situation that they're going through. And those hamsters, I'll tell you, they were awake and running strong on the wheel in my head the minute my eyes opened. Zoop, 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 zoop. And I felt myself sinking into the entire day, being just cloaked in fear and worry. Has that ever happened to you? But then I thought about this message, and I thought about this prayer. And I looked at what Paul had said, all those scriptures that we just read, and I thought about that, about changing my thinking and action. So I prayed, and I asked God to remove my fear and worry, which were character defects, and to strengthen me as I went out to do his bidding. But then I thought about what I was praying. I gave it some thought. I said, go out and do his bidding. So I asked him, what is your bidding for me today, Lord? And when I asked him, I got a small thought. It was about a tiny conversation I had had with somebody the night before at a meeting. It was just a passing conversation with a woman who had just started a new job in a fast food restaurant, and she was worried about not having a pair of safety slip shoes because her manager was getting upset with her for not having them. She told me the 30-second version of her life. She'd been through a long-term treatment program. She was working to get her kids back, and she needed to keep this job in order to get to the next phase of that, but she was afraid she might lose a job because she didn't have safety slip shoes. Now, I didn't think about this conversation much at the time because I have a lot of these conversations in recovery. We have them all the time. But now, lying in bed, asking God about doing his bidding, I thought about that conversation. So I began to think some more. Where does a person get safety slip shoes? Well, duh, Walmart, right? Walmart, of course. So I got up and I got dressed and off I went to Walmart. And I knew her size because she had told me, so I looked over all of the shoes, and I happened to wear the same size, so I tried a bunch of them on to see how they felt. And finally, I found a pair that seemed good, and I went to the register and I paid for them. And then I started thinking about how to give these shoes to her, and I didn't want her to know where they came from. That would be like really creepy. So I figured I'd go to the restaurant early and I'd give them to her manager. So off I went to Taco Bell. Meanwhile, I could feel my day changing right before my very eyes. I could sense and see and feel the hope of Jesus peeking through the darkness of my worry and fear. So I got to the restaurant. And I spoke to the manager there. Now, here's the kicker. He had never heard of this girl in his life, okay? She didn't even work there. He had no idea who she was. Now, I don't know what the deal was, right? But now I had these safety slip shoes, size 9.5. So I began to pray, God, let me do your bidding with these shoes. You know who they're for. Lead me to that person. Well, he hasn't yet, but since Tuesday, I've been praying that prayer, and you know what? It's been the drum beat in the back of the worry and the fear that tries to bubble up over other things in my life. Letting me be his hands and feet in the world is Jesus' way of giving me peace. And friends, letting you be his hands and feet in the world is his way of giving you peace too. So let's stand together for a moment. The worship team is going to lead us in this next song. And as they do, this altar is open for you to come, present your petitions to God, pray, give thanksgiving, ask him to change your thinking, and to receive the next steps you need to do for a new way of living that does God's bidding. You can leave all your hamsters here, friends. In fact, leave your whole lousy, stinking wheel, hamsters and all, on this altar. You don't need them anymore. You know why? You have something better. You have the peace of God. So come and receive peace.